It's Monday, May 16th, and this is the second episode of GeekwireTV. I promise this one will be a little better than episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Yeah. First thing I'm going to talk about today is went to see Thor over the weekend. It was pretty good. I'm not that I was surprised. I'd heard it was pretty good, but I really enjoyed myself. The Marvel movies, by and large, have been pretty excellent of late, and the setup for the Avengers is really cool. It was really entertaining. It was a lot of fun. They managed to bridge both the mythology of Norse mythology as well as the comics and the movie all sort of well. There's some things they dispensed with from the comic books that aren't necessarily necessary in the in this context. And at the same time, uh, in the Norse mythology, Loki and Thor are not actually brothers, but in the comic books they are. And they managed to again to skirt that line pretty well, and it was a really good time. It's also a great setup for the Avengers movie. I really can't wait. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Joss Whedon, right? So that's going to be really cool anyway. And there were some really great Easter eggs, which I won't spoil for you, but it was a lot of fun. The only criticism I have would be that some of the moments, because there's going to be an Avengers movie, some of the more dramatic moments were kind of robbed of their poignancy because what's going to happen in the long run. So other than that, that was a great time. I enjoyed it. Visually, it was stunning. I'm looking forward to seeing it again. And I don't usually like seeing movies in 3D, but it was worth seeing in 3D. So the next thing I want to talk about is I was on ICV2 over the weekend. I read an interesting article by Danny Arrington talking about the game store of the future. It was an interesting article. It talks about how hypothetically he's on his way to work and he gets an email saying, "Oh, your game product will be in, and you might like this," and kind of doing what stuff we already have does. Like, if you're on iTunes, you like this band, it'll say you might like this as well. We'll be doing a lot of that and reviews, and also when you download this game or you pre-order, you'll get a free app for your iPod or BlackBerry, stuff like that. It's kind of neat. It's kind of cool to see the vision of technology and gaming all being merged together. It's kind of neat. I don't know how close we are to that. The gaming industry is kind of interesting because in a lot of ways, a lot of companies can be very behind the times. There are some examples of companies that are a little more modern and a little bit better at practicing actual business, but they are the exception rather than the rule. But it was an interesting column. I recommend checking it out. And it was really good. It was a good read, and I mean, I definitely enjoy reading the articles on ICV2. They're always really entertaining and really insightful. So I mentioned in my last show, in addition to being a bit of a geek, I'm also find business really interesting. It's actually what I'm going to school for. And what a lot of people fail to realize is that geeky things are a business like any other. The show gets canceled like V just did because it wasn't making money. Companies are out to make a profit, and that's something that a lot of people don't realize. Now, there's some things like Firefly that are mismanaged, and there's some companies that don't actually do a good job of doing business. I'm not going to name names, but I'm sure you can think of a few. Wizards of the Coast Tower is a really good example of a company that does business really well. We may quibble with some of the things they do and why they do it, but overall, their business strategy is brilliant. Look at D&D 4th Edition. Look at their board games. But those are really good examples. Look at the fact they're dropping the miniatures line because it's not making them money. But I want to go back to the D&D 4th for a second. Wizards of the Coast D&D 3rd Edition was actually starting to be sold in major bookstores like Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, Chapters, etc. And the 3rd Edition books, the aesthetic of them, as well as the style of game, like it's a very complicated game. It's less complicated than 2nd Edition in a lot of ways, but it's still a complicated system. It doesn't necessarily fit well with what you would want to find in a major bookstore. So I can see them sort of changing what they did. In 4th Edition, it really is like World of Warcraft. It's a very simple game, very simple system. It's also really fun, really dynamic, by the way. I think it was a really good move on their part. And you also look at the way the D&D 4th Edition books look. And again, they look like they fit in that kind of environment. I think it's really brilliant. And also, because of the options we have as gamers, we can play Pathfinder, which is a good example of a really good fantasy role-playing game. It's also complicated, but there are other games as well. So it's not like we lack for choices in gamers, and I think D&D 4th is a really good entryway into gaming, and it fits, again, with what you'd find in a major bookstore. I think Wizards is really brilliant for sort of adapting to that. And to rag on Wizards for a second, one of the reasons I was really annoyed when I mentioned about on last week the pre-release was that it kind of was a dumb move. Having your pre-release on a day when your retailers are doing something else is not good business sense. That's why I was kind of down on it. I mean, it's just a silly idea, and I expect better from Wizards because they're, again, pretty business savvy. But everyone makes mistakes, and that's how it goes, right? So I mentioned on Friday on my last show that I'm a fan of Private Press and War Machine, and I've been playing the game since it came out. And I want to talk about them both as a business and a company, as well as some cool stuff that's happened. I got my new issue of No Quarter last Friday, and I read up on Unbound, which is really cool. And I'm actually kind of surprised that it's cool. When the initial rules for Unbound were teased, I was like, large scale games, don't really care. Sorry, not my thing. I played a couple 100-point games of War Machine, and I just haven't been thrilled by them. But I really like Unbound, and I'm really curious to try it. They introduce a few elements that make it a little more interactive, a little more dynamic. Particularly this I go, you go system where you activate a battle group and some units and solos, and then your opponent activates some battle groups, units and solos, and it goes back and forth until the round ends, and then you start a new round. And because you're always rolling off who goes first, so you could, in theory, unless I've misread the rules, and I cop that I may have done that, you can activate a battle group at last on your last turn, and then activate them first on the next turn if you go last and then go first. That sounds really cool to me, and it looks like a lot of fun. And because it's optional, you don't have to play. That's also really cool. So I'm looking forward to trying it out. I'm really excited. There's some other really cool stuff in the No Quarter. The new mercenary themeless with Magnus is really nifty, and the preview is really cool. The Crix Wraith engine looks exciting. I played Crix. I still have some models. I sold them mostly to play Khador, but I have enough for a fourth, and I'll probably end up picking up a Wraith engine because it's just really nifty. It's also a really cool sculpt. So, painting and putting it together will be a lot of fun, and seeing what it does on the table will also be a lot of fun. I want to talk about, but Unbound is really cool because it kind of shows how Privateer Press scales up the game without making you play more or bigger. There's a chap I know who was kind of complaining about the battle engines coming out, saying, "Oh, I have to play them," and it kind of vexed me. He's a really great guy, but it's like, no one's putting a gun to your head. You don't have to play with a battle engine. I'm fairly sure that a 50-point army without a battle engine and a 50-point army with a battle engine are both equally effective as long as they're well played. So, and that's what's really cool about what Private Press has always done, is they've always scaled up the game, but never made anything obsolete. Back in, the olden days, Black and White Prime, you had 3 Warcasters, a handful of Warjacks, and a few units and a few solos. Actually, had 1 solo. Crix had 2, the Necrotech and the Scarlock, to be technically correct. And you could build about a 500-point army in the old scale. And then the next book came out, Escalation, and you had the Warjacks of Renown, you had weapon crews, you had unit attachments. You kept adding stuff to it, but you didn't have to use any of it. And then you go to Apotheosis, which had the Epic Warcaster, which were fieldable at 750 under the old scale, and the character Warjacks. And then Mark II, where you have the theme lists. So you might want to take 2 units of Iron Fangs or 2 units of Mechanthros, but you don't have to. And then, with Unbound and with the battle engines. And what's really cool is Privateer Press has always scaled up the game, so you can play bigger games, do more stuff with your army, but never require you to. Playing under the new scale, a 15-point game or a 50-point game are both a lot of fun. They're fun for different reasons. They're fun in different ways, but they're still a lot of fun. And Privateer Press has always been really good about that, making the game fun at any scale. Unlike, say, Games Workshop. Not that I'm down on them, because I think they're a lousy company, but I don't particularly like the games that they make because I don't think they're as fun to play. But that's my opinion. I know a lot of people play them, and one thing I will say, their models are brilliant. The people who play it and who convert their models are amazing. Some of the stuff I see at tournaments, at events online, is just gorgeous, and they do that really well. I just don't think their game is as good. And the thing is that Warhammer 40K or fantasy doesn't scale. You can't play a Warhammer game with 2 squads. You can, but it's no fun. And that's something I really like in Privateer Press and what they do. And there's always been a really good business practice because, again, you can play Battle Box game, a heck of a lot of fun. You can play 50-point game, heck of a lot of fun. They both work really well, and that's really cool. There's really good business savvy. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Remember, go out there, be geeky, be awesome, and remember the 2 are not mutually exclusive. Thanks, and have a great day. See you Wednesday.